VR has become somewhat of a hot topic. However, it does not seem as if the industry has learned at all from its most recent blunders. Major media outlets and the companies themselves are certainly convinced of the prospects of VR gaming, but I would beg to differ that VR is going to be doomed to the same fate as 3D and motion controls before it. There are many obvious issues with VR, some that cannot be fixed with time and more innovation in technology, rate-limiting factors that will stunt VR from the onset. First, and most importantly, popular developers whose titles are desired by the hardcore audience and mainstream alike aren't going to tailor-make games to a system that is both niche and unproven in the marketplace, when they can continue to develop PC and console games that have a guaranteed audience. Sony and Oculus have assured that development for a multitude of titles is underway, but this leaves less popular developers and indie devs, where only a handful of titles will actually be worthwhile, with even less being desirable to the general audience, who must be convinced to buy such a product in relative droves to make it a success. There's also the issue of pure horsepower required to power a VR experience that doesn't make the user nauseous. In the case of PS4, it frankly doesn't seem possible to do so. As it stands, the current prototype runs at 1080p, for a resolution of 960 by 1080 for each eye. The games will also at the very least have to run at 60 frames a second, to avoid giving users motion sickness. PS4 is currently struggling to deliver regular titles at 1080p 60 FPS, let alone VR experiences where the level of detail is much more noticeable to the end user. Either the games will look terrible and run at acceptable frame rates, or vice versa. This point is not as relevant for Oculus Rift, as it can run on high-end PC hardware, where the sky's the limit. However, with this, price becomes even more of a concern for the Oculus camp. Then there's the glaring issue of value for VR, both perceived and otherwise. If I'm going to put a fucking box on my face, the experience better be impressive. I got the chance myself to try an Oculus dev kit that was running a racing sim demo, and while I was not convinced of the value of it, a hardcore racing sim guy might see something there. But this is an idealistic use case where a first-person cockpit view is a cherry-picked scenario for VR. It's also worth mentioning that the version of Oculus that I demoed was the earlier 1080p model, which looked incredibly grainy, which doesn't bode too well for Sony's 1080p headset. For the majority of titles being ported to VR, it's hard to see what VR would add to those games. You've got games like Tekken 7, Final Fantasy XIV, and Surgeon Simulator coming to VR. But what's the fucking point of any of those? What do I get out of VR for a fighting game and an MMO? If anything, it would make those games worse. So you're going to pay $400 or more to put a box on your face to have a worse experience than what you already own? Don't believe me that it's worse? Go watch this demo video right here for yourself. Tell me that staring at a monster's crotch and sucking more than you usually do is worth $400. Okay, so I want you to imagine your normal, everyday guy, the kind of person that buys 3 to 4 games per year. When it's finally time for him to get his console upgraded, he goes to the store and decides to buy a PlayStation 4. When he goes up to the clerk, they ask him if he's interested in a VR headset. This being a normal-ass person, he's going to go, I don't know what that is. When he finds out that it is a large headset that you wear on your face, that's probably a big enough reason to turn off the average person to it. I know it might be hard for some to believe, but the average consumer is not interested in wearing a large, isolating black box on their face. If that wasn't enough to turn that person off to it, the paltry amount of titles, and most importantly, the price tag will. However, in industries such as games, it is important to appease the hardcore demographic and let it trickle down to the mainstream by either word of mouth or sales from there. But I'm honestly not even convinced that VR has managed to get many tech enthusiasts interested in such a concept. Personally, I have no interest whatsoever in VR, and I don't think I ever will, even if the technology advances significantly. Because VR is always going to be a fundamentally weird screen that you latch on like a facehugger from Alien. It's something that's so awkward at its base entry level that it will have to constantly fight that stigma and prove that the experience that it can provide is worth both the high price tag and discomfort. Now, what happened last time the industry was infatuated with an add-on gimmick? No, not that one, but we'll get back to that later. I'm talking more this one. Oh, wait a second, this is completely different. This VR shit, they're putting their all behind it this time. Look how confident they are. People will say this online, people that think VR is the next big thing, and more power to them. I wish I thought it was too. But I'd like to remind them that Sony was very, very confident about PS Move back when that was coming out.
Between PlayStation and J.K. Rowling.
Every wizard needs a wand,
and stories come to life in a way never seen before. Okay, well, it is a live demo, so.
Ah, butterflies. Remember, this is just bewitched paper. Don't let me catch you trying this spell on the real thing. Nice one.
Okay, now go back. Go back, control the slides. That one. Remember this? If people don't want to wear chintzy hipster glasses on their face while they watch a movie, little light plastic glasses that weigh less than the ones that people wear for prescriptions, if they don't want to wear that on their face, why in the fuck would they want to wear this shit on their face for hours and hours and hours? Are you fucking kidding me? Have you not learned anything?
The Book of Spells is no ordinary book.
Look, VR is something that sounds great on paper and probably concepted very well in the R&D department at Oculus and Sony, but in reality it's an inherently flawed thing that has to fight so many uphill battles that I doubt it's even remotely possible for it to catch on and be a super successful thing. It's always going to be a niche thing if even it gets that far. Now, augmented reality, on the other hand, AR, that is something else entirely. That is something that has a lot of promise, not just for real-world application, but also for games. But that is another video entirely, and if you want to see me make that, drop me a like and a subscription, and thanks for watching.